A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to today's proceedings of the Senate. This being the 26th day of September 2019, this broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. The broadcast can be streamed live on YouTube, courtesy of the Parliament of Kenya YouTube channel. You can also follow the proceedings live on Senate TV, on Signet. As well, you can also watch the broadcast on KBC Channel 1. My name is Edward Kabasa. We'll take a look at the order of business this afternoon, where the debate on the approval of the county government's cash disbursement schedule for financial year 2019-2020 will proceed, and thereafter there will be division, and the senators will be voting on whether or not this particular motion should be approved by the House. The Establishment of Children's Homes Bill, Senate Bills number 12 of 2019 by Senator Dr. Agnes Zani, is also active in the Senate. The stage is second reading, and should the senators dispense of the business that precedes this particular one, then that debate will continue this afternoon. There is a motion by the nominated Senator Milson Tomanga on legal and policy interventions for caregivers of persons with permanent motor and neurological disorders. This particular motion is also active. It has not been debated conclusively, and the balance of time remaining there is 1 hour 40 minutes. Senator Rose Nyamunga also has a motion in the order of business this afternoon, and the motion is on the engagement of community health workers by county government. That aware that county health facilities and the promotion of health or primary health care are devolved functions, and each county government is striving to offer the best health care to the people of Kenya. Cognizant that the provision of healthcare services is continuously riddled with numerous challenges ranging from understaffing of personnel to inadequate facilities and equipment, resulting in congestion in hospitals, further restricting effective service delivery. The senator is concerned that diverse nature of counties and wanting infrastructural development is compromising the quality and accessibility of healthcare centers, especially during the emergency situations, resulting in loss of many lives occasioned by the failure by patients to reach health facilities in time. She is further concerned that in each county there are numerous unemployed community health workers who are adept at working with communities in emergency situations and have the requisite experience to support the medical practitioners in our country, where according to the World Health Organization 2014 report, there are 2 doctors for every 10,000 people. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Council of Governors, in partnership with the Ministry of Health, develop a policy for the training, certification, and employment of community health workers to enhance the emergency health service delivery in counties and facilitate the said community health workers with the necessary basic equipment for use during emergency cases. That motion is by the Honorable Member Rose Nyamunga. Another motion in the order of business is by Senator Sylvia Kasanga, and it's on the formation of community forest associations to aid in management of forest resources within counties. That the Senate urges that all citizens, as per Article 69, subsection 2 of the Constitution and sections 48 and 52 of the Forest Conservation Management Act, be encouraged through the relevant national government ministries and county departments to contribute information of community forest associations to expedite community participation in forest resources management. That the national government And all the 47 county governments operationalize tax and fiscal incentives to promote forest conservation and management and prevent degradation of tree cover in public, private, and community lands as measures of ensuring sustainability. And also the Senator urges that the national government communicates progress towards establishment of a national tree planting week so that state agencies, corporations, and Kenyans can adequately prepare for the event. And finally, the Senate urges that all county assemblies initiate processes of enacting legislation on forestry functions for county governments. Also in the order of business this afternoon is a petition to the Senate by Mr. John Njogu Njoroge, a citizen of the Republic of Kenya and a resident of Nakuru County, concerning resettlement of East Mau Forest evictees, and this petition will be presented to the Senate by the Speaker of the Senate. The Senator for Wajir County, Senator Abdullahi Ali, will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare regarding the recruitment of senior personnel at the Geothermal Development Company. Nominated Senator Fahia Aji will seek a statement from the Standing Committee on National Security, Defense and Foreign Relations regarding flights arriving into Kenya from Mogadishu, Somalia. And after the Senate Majority Leader will issue a statement on the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 1st October 2019. If you're just joining us, there's some live pictures from the Senate chambers where we are waiting for business of the day to commence, and there is some activity at the door signaling that particular business will begin in a matter of seconds. The broadcast is brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. Now I will hand you over for the live proceedings of the Senate on this 26th day of September 2019. My name is Edward Kabasa. Good afternoon.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we beseech you to behold with abundant favor and blessings as your servants whom you have been pleased to call to leadership positions in this republic. We seek guidance to treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Honorable Senators, I hereby report to the Senate that a petition has been submitted through the clerk by Mr. Joseph Njogu Njoroge, a citizen of the Republic of Kenya and the chairperson of East Mau Forest evictees in Nakuru County. As you are aware, under Article 119 of the Constitution, and I quote, every person has a right to petition to consider any matter within its authority, including enacting, amending, or repealing any legislation. Honorable Senators, the salient issues raised in the petition are: 1, that the members of the East Mau Forest evictees lived inside the Mau Forest for 70 years as caretakers to the forest since the colonial period in Kenya and were later evicted from the forest in the year 1988. That persons from different counties, among them Bomet, Kericho, and Baringo, were resettled in the same forest. 3, that the East Mau Forest evictees wrote to the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission, TGRC, on 21 September 2011, and the National Land Commission on 7 June 2018, but no response had been received to date. That the evictees are currently landless and have lived as squatters since 1988 and have never been resettled. The petitioners therefore pray that the Senate investigates the matter with a view to resolving the resettlement of East Mau evictees. Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 231, I shall now allow comments, observations, or clarifications in relation to the petition for not more than 30 minutes. Senator Onesimus Kipchumba Murkomen.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, the question of squatters, and particularly the possibility that we still use the word squatters in our great republic in regard to or in relation to any citizen of this country is a great shame. Just the same way we confidently talk about people who we call them slum dwellers. It's an insult, Mr. Speaker, on the integrity of the people of Kenya. It's the responsibility of the state to ensure that its citizens are settled or resettled, to ensure that this country, Mr. Speaker, people can live with dignity, which is a constitutional right. I therefore support this, Mr. Speaker. And I speak as a person who knows the pain of being a son of a squatter, Mr. Speaker, living from one corner to another, being evicted by police, burning houses, the impact on the right to education, Mr. Speaker, the impact on the right to health, the impact, Mr. Speaker, on the right to dignity. I remember very well that every time our houses were burned when we were small children, we'd be forced to go and sleep in under trees, Mr. Speaker, and caves. Mr. Speaker, you know the place. You are the DC of that area. And you know very well what we went through, even though you came far much later when a lot of those atrocities have been committed. So when I hear that anybody is living in shanties, Mr. Speaker, or without shelter, it's something that concerns me. Article 43 of the Constitution talks about social economic rights, and it's that the duty of the state to ensure that its people are settled. It's also the duty of the state, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that Kenyans enjoy the right to clean, Mr. Speaker, environment. And, Mr. Speaker, we must protect our forests. We have no resource that can be elastic. And therefore, it's important to protect the Embu forest where I come from, or the whole of Cherangani Hills, the whole of Mount Elgon, Mr. Speaker, forest, which is in your county, the whole of Mau forest, which is in 7 counties, the whole of Mount Kenya forest, which is also in about 4 counties. And, Mr. Speaker, this duty does not, Mr. Speaker, absolve the state of ensuring that as we do so, our citizens live a dignified life. Mr. Speaker, this idea that state officers speak with a lot of contempt of citizens and use language like I don't care, with a lot of bravado, Mr. Speaker, with a lot of hubris. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, it belongs to pre-2010 Constitution. The post-2010 Constitution is about consultation, cooperation, it's about sitting down, it's about consulting with citizens to ensure that everything which is done within the Constitution itself, within the confines of protection of personal rights, and, Mr. Speaker, with an intention of ensuring that you further the welfare of the citizens of this country. And therefore, I hope the committee that will investigate this matter will come back to this House with strong views, Mr. Speaker, with strong recommendations that are implementable. And the good thing which I have realized, Mr. Speaker, a report like ours, and I want to challenge the committee, and I'm sure it's the Committee of Environment, if they can come up with a very good report Don't be surprised that those reports are the same reports that will be found in the UN circles, Mr. Speaker. It will be used in African Court of Human and People Rights. It will be used in many fora, including East Africa Court of Justice, when these citizens are looking for fairness and justice. You can see they're already saying, we have done this, we've not succeeded. They have come to Senate because they have a faith in this House. The document, the report we are going to prepare should be implemented by our government. But even where they are unable to do so, a further mechanism of processes of accountability will ensue, and the document we'll have prepared will be very useful for it. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator James Orengo.
Mr. Speaker, I also want to support this petition. As you know, one of the important areas for the struggle for freedom in Kenya was on land. And the land question has not been resolved up to now, despite half a century, more than half a century of independent Kenya. The Constitution set out a framework with which to deal with the land question, including ways and means of dealing with the historical injustices insofar as land is concerned, and particularly in the coastal and central Kenya and Rift Valley. There are many areas where the land question continues to be a big problem that needs immediate resolution. Mr. Speaker, it is important that so long as we do not have any means of employment for a majority of Kenyans, land seems to be the only available resource for the ordinary people for purposes of settlement, shelter, and even earning their living. And therefore, the land question in this particular context forms a very, very important pillar in relation to what the government needs to do. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, it is also important that we protect our water towers and our forests. You've seen what has been going on in Brazil along the Amazon. It has brought a worldwide concern about the effects of climate change. And climate change is with us, and unless we can be able to resolve it as a nation, because the effects of it can be local depending on how we manage our environment, but even the little things that we do within our immediate environment affect the world as a whole. Therefore, land being a finite resource, we must look for more imaginative and innovative ways of trying to give our people shelter and a way to earn their living. Mr. Speaker, if you go to China, China has one of the biggest populations in the world. Most of China actually is arid and semi-arid. A lot of China is desert. If it's not desert, then it's in regions where to sustain human life is extremely difficult. So the growth of the Chinese economy has helped, the big population living in China to try and migrate to towns and industrial enclaves in order to earn a living. So in Kenya, probably what we need to do, because I think this is going to be a persistent problem in Kenya, that people continue looking for land. Some of it is people looking for land for speculation. And those who are looking for land for speculation, I think that must be stopped. Those who are owning large tracts of land, they must surrender that land to the state to settle the people who do not have land. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you look at individual Kenyans who own large tracts of land, some of the land they own is bigger than some of the counties in the Republic of Kenya. And they did not get this land as a matter of right, or they inherited from their clans or their families. This is land that they actually got from the state, including historically, if you look at the Delameres, the land they got was not the land belonging to them by inheritance. This is land they were given by the state, a colonial state, and some of this needs to be addressed. I think if we have reached a level where, for example, to find foreigners in Laikipia being given 100,000 acres of land. And the local communities who are living in Laikipia do not have land, or in Samburu, you find they don't have land. And these are nomadic people who need to move with their stock. And we have wildlife also, which must have corridors for them to move around. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, to enable Kenyans feel that the land question is being dealt with properly and directly and fairly, those who own large tracts of land must explain what they are doing with that land. In fact, if you look at the national land policy as it exists today, there is a requirement that there should be some formation of some kind of tax on land which is left idle. And there is a lot of land in Kenya which belongs to individuals, rightly so, but these pieces of land are either leases or freeholds, which was originally public land. And if they cannot find a way of using that land effectively, for purposes of building the economy, I think that land should be expropriated and given back to the people. They're like in this petition, you find, the people who live like in the forests. There are people who live in the forest not because they were taken there by anybody, but because that was how they lived in the past. They were hunters and gatherers. Such people to be moved out of the forest without compensation or finding alternative settlements would be highly unjust. But that is not to say that we cannot protect and we should not protect our forests. Those forests must be protected, and those who are living in the forests, we must find a humane way of making sure that they are peacefully moved from those areas to alternative areas, and the forests are then protected for the benefit of us and for future generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Adan Dulo Fatuma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this petition. Mr. Speaker, I think it's really very serious because it looks like eviction is taking place everywhere in this country without due process to the law. Mr. Speaker, I believe the law is very clear in that whenever there is an eviction or whenever acquisition of land is supposed to happen, communities must be involved. And this time around, when devolution is in place, the county government should be involved when there is an eviction that is taking place or a compulsory acquisition of land. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the various institutions of government are actually allocating lands to the individuals or to institutions of governments without involving communities who are living there. I have a similar situation in my county today, as we are speaking right now. KDF is actually doing survey in an area where communities have never been involved. They are claiming that they have the land was set aside for them in 1960. Those are many years back because, Mr. Speaker, there are several settlements that has taken place from 1960 up to date. Mr. Speaker, this is really, really unfair. If Mau South members of community are evicted, and up to now they have not been compensated, where do they go? Are they going to be thrown to the bush, or are they going to be languishing as poor people without land in this country? I really don't understand what is happening in our country. Mr. Speaker, I wish the Committee of Lands and Environment should be able to sit down with the relevant ministries to stop these shenanigans because it's really becoming too much. Mr. Speaker, I support and I hope the committee will speed up the process to ensure that communities get justice whenever eviction takes place. I thank you.
Senator Moses Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the petitioner or the petition before the House is very clear. And I think whoever is petitioning also understands and appreciates
that conservation of water catchment areas is necessary, because it's not asking about being taken back to the forest, but it's asking about investigating and finding a resettlement solution. Mr. Speaker, in this country, we lost an opportunity after the 2010 Constitution to enact new laws to change the structure of land tenure. We have continued, Mr. Speaker, to tell Kenyans and make them believe that if you have no land, you are worthless. It is not true, because if you go to many countries, Mr. Speaker, people live and live very decently without end title deed in their closets. If you go to Denmark, Mr. Speaker, if your father has 1,000 acres of farmland and he passes on, there's no guarantee that you'll inherit that land. You have to go before a panel and be interviewed and be interrogated to prove yourself that if it's a farm, you are capable of running a farm. That is when they can let you inherit the land. If you don't, they pass it on to somebody who can carry on with farming. Land is a tool of production. It's not an instrument of pride and ownership. Mr. Speaker, we want the Committee of Agriculture, chaired by the distinguished Senator for Nyandarua, Mr. Speaker, to look into this matter very carefully. We have, like Senator Orengo said, people who have lived with and protected forests. The Ndorobos, the Ogeks, and all those other communities. Then we have invaders, people who walk into forests armed with power saws on their shoulders and will mow down any tree in sight, burn charcoal, and create deserts where we have tropical forests, Mr. Speaker. And those are the people we must deal with. In resettling people, Mr. Speaker, we must also encourage the government to create urban centers with amenities and facilities where people can live in small holdings, but with schools, with hospitals, with police stations, with everything, so that they cannot be able to be tempted to run back to the forest. But more important, Mr. Speaker, and I think the majority leader and his government should feel ashamed of themselves, Mr. Speaker, that the European Union governments are sending money to Kenya to protect forests, to conserve forests, to plant trees, when the Jubilee government is so fixated with brick and mortar and grandiose projects fueled by greed and corruption. We don't have any money in the budget we just passed, Mr. Speaker, from the government of Kenya to replant trees in any of the counties. Yet the Europeans have given 80 million to each of 11 identified counties to plant trees. So our priorities are all wrong, Mr. Speaker. And lastly, even the money that the Europeans have given, as we're evicting people from the Mau, there is no allocation of part of that money to the Mau reforestation. Instead, they have sent to other places where they are misdescribing water towers. The very last, majority leader, we must bring a bill to this House to protect forests by obligating government to avoid this moving in and out of forests all the time. Let's fence off all national forests and protect them together with the wildlife therein, the flora, the fauna, and leave the protectors of the forest, the Ogeks, the Dorobos, to continue hunting and gathering as we evolve them to better life.
Senator Nderitu Kinyua.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity. From onset, I stand to support this petition, and it is heartbreaking to see how Kenyans are being treated, to be evicted from where they have lived for a long time. But it is not lost to us that we must maintain our environment. But as we maintain our environment, it is important as well to make sure that Kenyans are living and are treated to dignity. Mr. Speaker, if you come to Laikipia, we are facing the same. In an area called Marmanet, people who are living in Marmanet were evicted from that forest. They were sent to villages. If you go to Nyahururu, there's a village called Maina Village, in Manguo Village. People are living in very unconducive conditions, Mr. Speaker. And it is so unfortunate because in Laikipia, it is believed we have very, very large tracts of land, and people who are in those large tracts of land are foreigners, Mr. Speaker. So it beats any logic for any government to be in power and its citizens are suffering. Mr. Speaker, if you go to Nanyuki as well, you'll find a place called Kwambuzi, where people are evicted. They are living in those bad conditions in villages, Mr. Speaker. You go to Majengo, Nanyuki, Mr. Speaker, you go to Riki, and the conditions they are living in, there are no hospitals, there are no roads. It's like a government has neglected its people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are people who know how to maintain an environment. You go to Mount Kenya, we have a very good environment, but it doesn't help Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. It helps a few people, Mr. Speaker, because we keep suffering. We have those animals. We have elephants, Mr. Speaker, which are all in these big tracts of land. And when they leave those areas, they just come to us small pieces of land to cause havoc. Mr. Speaker, we feel frustrated, and that's why I stand to support this petition. But I want to congratulate the committee, which is chaired by Githiomi, for a good job they are doing concerning we brought here the petition of Marmanet, and it is our hope that they are going to do a good job, and people of Laikipia are going to get justice, and they are going to get pieces of, not only small pieces of land, Mr. Speaker, because 90% of Laikipia is occupied by about 10 people, Mr. Speaker. So all what we are asking, Mr. Speaker, it is for us to be given what belongs to us, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Langat Christopher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for also giving me this chance to make my contribution towards this. I want to say that it is indeed very sad that at this time, people have been living for around 70 years in an unstable situation, being displaced, and up to this time, they are still squatters in their own country. I want to narrow down to the issue of Mau, that at least I have some few knowledge about it. People who are living in Mau, remember I'm not saying Mau Forest because not all the places that those people are living in is not necessarily the gazetted forest. Actually, as Senator Orengo was saying, some of them were Okiek, the Dorobos, and the rest, who were living in the current, those who are from Kericho and Bomet, they were initially living historically in the current areas that were occupied by the colonialists, and they planted tea and took them as schemes and displaced those people who went actually to the forest. And when the colonial master left, it's unfortunate that the tea plantations are there, and they are not benefiting those people in any way, and they never went back to their former land. Some of the other lands that were their ancestral lands were finally occupied by the current black colonial masters, people who were fortunate after independence that they had powers, political powers, and they actually occupied large chunks of land at the expense of those people who are regarded as intruders to the forest today. Some of them who are living still were originally from Bomet and Kericho, and they are in Mau, are not actually in the cassetted forest. They are in a block which was trust land for the Maasais. And the people who are living there initially sold to these particular people, and they have got even rightful title deeds. But the interesting part of it is that whenever eviction takes place, the people from the CS lands or the forest and the rest simply send guards to displace these people without even asking them. You hear even utterances from some of our fellow politicians and leaders saying title deeds are mere papers. And these people really have been suffering. The worst part of it is in that side of Mau, where even during our campaigns, all of us right from the president, went to those places and assured those people that they are rightfully there. And they are wondering, and they have been telling us, so you are lying, come and tell us that you are cheating us so that we may see what next. Those are the places whereby even the government constructed schools with, again, title deeds are there. And even right now, eviction threat is very much, right? And they have just been told that after examinations, prepare to leave. So it is very interesting. I would like to ask that committee, with all the humility, that they bring us a solution to this particular perennial problem. I would wish that they do a lot of research, investigate exactly what is happening among these people. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that we've been mistaken a lot. People, even some of our colleagues have been asking us, Langat, with all your education, you are supporting people to live in forest. It is interesting. But the thing is that these people have been misunderstood. These people, actually, no one has come out to understand them. And I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, that people from South Rift, for example, are not all that insane or mad to encroach into the forest. In fact, where I come from Bomet County, we have Kotiebalungu Forest, which now nobody has ever interfered with. We are surrounded by the Mao Forest and the part of the Bomet and Kericho. No one has ever touched them. So these are the people who are actually, they know historically that they were displaced. And even the most of the lands in Nakuru, part of it, which they could have been given by the government, which were former ADCs, the previous governments rewarded people who were in positions and they are not even using up to this time. And people are wondering, we are being chased from the Mau and our land is being occupied by the people who are not even using them. So it is an issue that has to be corrected with sobriety, Mr. Speaker, so that this particular perennial problem comes to an end. I want to support this particular statement, Mr. Speaker, and I urge the committee that will be responsible about it to do thorough work and bring a solution to this particular problem that has been affecting our people. It's not only Bomet. Land issues are many. When we were in Taita Taveta, Mr. Speaker, we realized that the land in Taita Taveta, 65% of it is occupied by the animals, and in fact, the animals are benefiting from it than the human beings. And whenever the human beings attack the animals, their issues become even more harsh than when the animals, yeah? Yeah, animals indeed. So I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, I support this statement, and I would like to say that it is something that we need to take it seriously. Thank you.
Senator Kabaka Boniface.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity also to hear my view. I was laughing with my senior Senator Weta when he's telling me in Taita Taveta, where Senator Maruma comes from. I can see Senator Maruma is also enjoying it. That first mass of land is owned by 2 Kenyans, and that is nothing but a historical injustice. Because one of the guys is a foreigner, the other one is a local. Anyway, for those who happen to have been students of law at Nairobi University, those formative years, including my senior Senator Orengo here, they must have really led the land law at its inception. They must have been told by the late Professor H.W.O.O. And he did very good manuals, 2 manuals, one historical, and the second one was a substantive land law. Of necessity, or rather of my concern, is the one on the history of land law in this Kenya. But one of the key cases which every student would recall or remember is the case of Olejogo, where Maasais were evicted from their ancestral land by the white imperialist. And when they sued, ultimately they lost on the basis that the Maasais or the African did not have a cogent
a kind of a conventional administration. In other words, they didn't have the capacity to enter into contractual agreements with the white man. And from time to time, you do realize that this is a replica for other countries. Like it's been mentioned by seniors, Senator Orengo, countries even up to date, like Amazon Basin. For those who watch DSTV and the National Geographic, they see how the environment is destroyed, by the imperialists, those who want to do mining, those who want to do deforestation, and so forth. It's all over the world. And if you overfly, Mau and other areas, the so-called the big towers, water towers in Kenya, definitely you'll be moved to tears. I have overflown there thrice actually, with the senator of Narok, Olekina, and I found myself sobbing, looking at the devastation and the wanton destruction of the forest, for no reason at all. Because you find guys are just burning charcoals. You find the small streams, the distribution, avenues are dry. There is no water, and definitely this one affects the Nile waters. What am I saying? I'm saying whereas we have the so-called, the genuine Kenyans who are sort of affected and don't have land. I'm trying, Mr. Speaker, to avoid to use the word squatters, because to me, it is not a good expression at this hour, at this century of a new constitutional dispensation. But you find others are speculators. Some are artificials, especially in the urban areas. Some will move, speculating from private land, and that creates some conflict. Mr. Speaker, someone has said this problem is universal. Without going very far, just next to me, or next to where I come from, just in Mavoko, we have a problem there, especially the land belonging, which initially belonged to Kamba community. But historically, after the government of Her Majesty the Queen paved the way to the independence flag of Kenya, and the powers of land ownership was vested to the Prime Minister, then the President, and then the Commissioner for Land then, where Senator Orengo once, was the boss as the Minister for Lands and Settlement. And I don't know whether it was urban development, but the Minister for Lands. The lease were given to the Portland, the so-called East African Portland Cement Company Limited for 99 years, for the main purpose of extracting the raw materials used to manufacture cement product. And I did peruse the copies of the leases. In the said there are some conditions in the leases which says that upon exhaustion of those raw materials, the same land was to revert back to the state. And indeed, by implication ipso facto, the state holds the land in trust for itself and also for the public. Mr. Speaker, it's ironical that in those conditions, Portland, or rather the so-called East African Portland Company Limited, has no obligation, has no legal right to sell the land to third parties. They have done that. They have sold to very key individuals, some American companies who have put up very nice houses there. And now, instead of giving that land back to the Kamba communities and other communities who are living there, because, Mavoko sub-county is a cosmopolitan sub-county in Machakos County, that land, or rather, those people have rendered the said land. They have done fantastic development, but now it's a big shame that the government want to evict them. The other day, the county commissioner of Machakos issued a veritas notice that the said land, the said Kenyans be evicted forthwith without due regard to the laws relating to eviction. Mr. Speaker, sir, some of the grounds of allegation of eviction is that that land be set aside for the government to push for the four agendas, among others, housing development. But now the question is it the policy of the government to come in and destroy very nice houses, which are multi-billions, to pave way for another house? That is the question. Mr. Speaker, sir, as a senator of from that area, I read a lot of mischief because it is in public domain, and we shall prove it to the state that that land is to be grabbed by some people from Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, sir, reading your mood, when you look at me, I know time is of essence. I need to say that...
I was just wondering whether you are discussing a different...
No, I do analogy. I say this is the question of eviction, is very universal in no other areas. And I took a case where I come from. My role here is a representative under Article 96 of the people where I come from, the interlink between the national government and the counties. And I would be doing the service also to discuss matters from other counties per se, without drawing some semblance or some similarity to what is happening now. In fact, next week, God willing, I'm going to bring a similar motion to that. But let me summarize this and say that the law has been settled in this country, in the High Court. The decision of the so-called Muthurwa case, where Justice Lenaola, my classmate, who is a judge of Supreme Court today, did indeed give very sounding reasons or procedures of evicting the so-called squatters, including the domestication of international laws, principles, as it is known, that the courts, or rather the state, has to add fair regard to things like the shelter, the health of those people, especially women and youth, pregnant women also, school-going children, the season, when whether the schools are opened, and so forth. And of course, indeed, that is a way of upholding Chapter 4 of our Constitution, which is the Bill of Rights, which is very elaborate from Articles 19 to 57, if one wants to see the violation of the same. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I sit down, I support the said petition by that particular Kenyan, that the relevant committee of land critically looks at the issues being raised here, and come up with a kind of a resolute solution to make sure that Kenyans who are affected do not live in trees like birds. They need to live decent, a decent life, so that we can now say that we have a harmonious country. Otherwise, the two tribes will remain: the tribe of the rich, and then the rich are the haves and the have-nots. Karl Marx, wisdom is at play, up to date. I support, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Abdullahi Ibrahim, finally.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Me, I will not take that long, like the senator from Machakos. Mr. Speaker, sir, the issue here is that, as the last statement he made, is the haves and the have-nots. I think this committee should look into land tenure system. They look at those ones who have big tracts of land, and since most of them are in leadership, they should provide some money so that their land can be bought by the government and resettlement these few individuals, these poor Kenyans, can be resettled in those lands, Mr. Speaker. Otherwise, we will end up in having counties like Laikipia, Kiambu, Nakuru, where Taita Taveta, where some few individuals own the whole county, while most of the others are squatters, Mr. Speaker. I support the petition. Thank you.
Okay, honorable senators, pursuant to Standing Order 2321, the petition should be committed to the relevant standing committee for its consideration. And in this case, I direct that the petition be committed to the Standing Committee on Lands, Environment, and Natural Resources. In terms of Standing Order 232.2, the committee is required in not more than 60 calendar days from the time of reading the prayer to respond to the petitioners by way of a report addressed to the petitioner and laid on the table of the House. I thank you. Next statement, Senator Murkomen. Petition, sorry.
Mr. Speaker, I present a petition to the Senate concerning from residents of Elgeyo Marakwet County, and I'll read their names at the end of the petition, concerning the arbitrary cancellation of Kimware Dam and scaling down of Aror Dam. We, the undersigned, citizens of the Republic of Kenya and residents of Elgeyo Marakwet County, draw the attention of the Senate to the following. One, that by a media release by the President's spokesperson on 18 September 2019, the public was informed of His Excellency the President's decision to cancel the construction of Kimware Dam and scaling down of development of Aror Dam based on a report of a technical committee which had been appointed by the head of state. That a careful review of the statement by the petitioners revealed the following issues of concern. One, that technical committee whose report formed the basis for the President's drastic decision to cancel the project was chaired by Principal Secretary for Infrastructure, Professor Paul Maringa, and comprised of Julius Matu, Quantities Affair, Engineer Benjamin Mwangi, and Engineer John Muiruri. Two, that the report on the committee raised doubt regarding the financial and technical viability of Kimware and Aror Dam projects and recommended cancellation of Kimware Dam project and scaling down of Aror Dam project on 5 grounds: lack of technical design, lack of feasibility study and existence of a fault line on the project area, that the area is settled and compensation and settlement cost will arise, unsustainable operation and maintenance cost, and overpricing. Aside from the press statement, the report has not been published in full, thus the detailed assessment that led to the President's decision are unavailable to the public gallery and the petitioners more particularly. That the instruments for the appointment of the technical committee and the committee's method of work over the 30-day period of its existence, as intimated in the press statement, are unavailable to the public. That the petitioners are deeply aggrieved by the decision to interfere with these projects whose significance to the lives of hundreds of thousands of people of Elgeyo Marakwet stand thwarted, and wish to respond to the 5 issues raised by the technical committee as follows. On the lack of technical design on Kimware Dam, the lack of technical design of Kimware Dam is not a surprise, as the contract negotiated between the Kenyan government and the engineering, procurement, and construction contractor entailed the design, financing, and building components. The lack of design cannot therefore be the basis for cancellation, as the design process is an integral part of the contract, and to the best of our knowledge, the contractors have now finalized the design of the project. On the lack of feasibility study and existence of a fault line, the report's suggestion that the feasibility study of Kimware Dam has been conducted and reliance on the feasibility study conducted 2 decades ago, indicating the existence of a fault line, is completely misleading. This is because the report does not take into account the fact that under the present project, a comprehensive geotechnical study has been concluded by the contractor and no significant geological concern identified. Further, under the contract, all risks on design and construction are borne by the engineering, procurement, and construction contractor, hence no project risks are envisaged or are mitigated. On the question of compensation, Article 40 of the Constitution protects property rights and recognizes that whenever such property is compulsorily acquired for public purpose, full, prompt, and fair compensation is payable. The petitioners are aware that the government of Kenya has paid out billions of shillings to landowners in relation to displacement and resettlement of people in various dam projects. Thwake in Kitui, 3 billion, Karumenu in Kiambu County, 3 billion, Ruiru 2 in Kiambu County, 3 billion, Thipa Dam, Kirinyaga County, 5 billion, and Mwache, Kwale County, 4.9 billion. The petitioners find the decision to ground the cancellation of the project on the need for compensation to be disturbingly discriminatory of the landowners and communities in Keyo and Marakwet. On the issue of operation and maintenance cost, it was suggested by the technical committee that the water supply mechanism to the dam would involve pumping, hence costly and unsustainable. The real position is that the water would flow downstream from the dam to powerhouse to generate 20 megawatts of electricity and then to irrigate 2,000 acres. None of this water would be pumped at any stage. On the issue of overpricing for the purpose of proposed downscaling of Aror Dam, we are aware that 2 independent studies done in 2012 by NTN of Iran and 2013 by WAPCOS, a state-owned engineering agency of the government of India, placed the cost of Aror multipurpose dam Kenya shillings 29.7 billion and 30.2 billion respectively, Kenya shillings. The technical committee has now proposed to scale down Aror by 40% from 96 meter to 60 meter dam at a construction cost of 15.4 billion. The petitioners wonder whether this 15.4 billion shillings includes cost of design, financing, and insurance. The non-availability of this information means that the petitioners and Kenyans are not in a position to determine whether any cost saving will be realized. Instead, what is clear to the petitioners is that the proposed scaling down of the dam from 96 meters to 60 meters compromises the long-term objective of the project, namely maximum water harvesting and storage necessary for ensuring sustainable provision of water even during prolonged future droughts. That the petitioners believe that there are serious constitutional and legal violations that emanate from the technical committee's report. These violations touch on, among others, matters of infringement of human rights of the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County. That the petitioners request the Senate to intervene and halt this unfair, discriminatory, and arbitrary decision to cancel cumulative and scaling down of Aror dams on the following grounds. 1, the composition of the technical committee is contrary to the provision of Public Service Values and Principles Act 2015, which requires impartiality and equity in provision of public service, Section 7.1, C, D, and 7.5 of the Act, to the extent that all the members of the technical committee do not represent the ethnic, gender, and regional diversity in Kenya. The establishment of the technical committee was not made by the President in writing and under seal in terms of Article 135 of the Constitution, and the committee's precise composition and mandate was unknown to Kenyans until the time it submitted its findings. 3, the report of the committee is not available to the public, hence denying the public the right to assess the validity of its findings in detail. Number 4, the decision to establish an ad hoc technical committee to investigate only 2 projects out of hundreds of projects across the country, to use the results of the investigation to deny the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County their rightful share of national development, amounts to gross violation of the Constitution. The decision of His Excellency the President to revoke international contract is likely to constitute a unilateral breach that will occasion colossal financial loss to the country, which liability will diminish revenue available for sharing as between national and county governments, and thus detrimental to the people of Kenya. The decision to ground the cancellation of the Kimwarer and Aror Dam projects on the need for compensation of landowners is flagrant discrimination in light of the massive land-related compensation made elsewhere by Kenya government with respect to numerous infrastructure projects. That the petitioner submits this petition through their able and duly elected representative, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. That none of the issues raised in this petition are pending before any court of law, constitutional, or other legal body. Wherefore, your humble petitioners pray that the Senate, 1, do investigate the issue raised with a view of ensuring that the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County are not deprived of development projects that they deserve. 2, that the Senate do everything under the law to ensure that the report of the technical committee is not implemented until such time that the Senate will have determined that the said committee is legally constituted and their actions determined to be fair and justifiable. Signed on 25th of September 2019 by Peter Barngetuny of PO Box 451 Iten and Titus Chemase of PO Box 57 Chipkorio. The ID numbers and signatures provided. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know just to make a few comments on the issue, because I have now presented on behalf of the residents of Elgeyo Marakwet. It's just basically to say, Mr. Speaker, like we've always said in this House, Kenyans have a lot of faith on the Senate. And there's a lot of faith that this country should be governed as per the Constitution. What I read from this petition is members of public who are eager to know the truth, who, Mr. Speaker, are saying that we have more than 100 projects, more than 50 projects that are related to water. But two projects have been subjected to ad hoc and arbitrary investigation, Mr. Speaker, and that investigation is being done by what's called a technical committee, which is not known in law, which is appointed without gazettemen, which is not appointed in writing. And Mr. Speaker, the petitioners are asking the Senate to really audit the position in law of this technical committee and the subsequent implementation of their report, and whether they were competently appointed and whether they had the legal and constitutional mandate to carry out the work they did, and whether the head of state can actually unilaterally cancel a contract, Mr. Speaker, that is existing between parties that are meant to implement a project. That is very important because, Mr. Speaker, in May 2014, and I was there, the president held a press conference to announce to the public that he must pay the Anglo leasing contracts, despite the fact that those contracts, Mr. Speaker, they did not deliver services, they didn't do anything because of the way the international legal instruments were mismanaged. And so these people are worried that we can easily find ourselves in a situation where some contractor will be paid colossal amount of money for breach of contract without delivering service to the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County, to the people of Kenya, and at the same time, without actually having the project on one hand, and you are not getting the money back, Mr. Speaker, because we've seen this situation happen in many of the international disputes that has involved the people of Kenya, especially under ICSID or London Court of Arbitration. Number 2 is that, Mr. Speaker, as the people of Elgeyo Marakwet County, this is just my offshore comments on this, is that I support the petitioner's argument, Mr. Speaker, that this is not so much about the technicality of the project, whether the money was stolen or was not stolen. The petitioner are not asking Senate to determine whether money was stolen or was not stolen. Instead, Mr. Speaker, they are asking whether legal processes have been followed, so that if the process is fair, then the results will be fair. And Mr. Speaker, particularly that there is a separate discussion elsewhere in a court of law regarding whether money was stolen or not. This one is about were the projects cancelled fairly. For example, Mr. Speaker, we are being told our road dam is being scaled down to 15 billion from 28 billion, and we are being told from a size of 90 meters to 60 meters, meaning there is an admission that if the project was 90 meters, it would carry the amount of money that existed from the beginning. And so the question we're asking ourselves is that how did this, for 30 days, a committee, Mr. Speaker, that is not appointed properly in law, come to the conclusion that 15.5, where the bill of quantities, maybe a proper bill of quantities could say 5 billion and would save another 10 billion. Maybe it would say, the bill of quantities would say 10 billion. So the question which must be found by the relevant committee you are going to give is a legal question as to whether a proper procedure was followed to arrive at a certain decision and whether that decision is fair. The last thing, Mr. Speaker, is to say that the petitioners here are asking very serious issues about fairness. Fairness in terms of distribution of development. Senator Wetangula last time, was always insistent in this House on publishing all projects that are happening in Kenya and where they are located in the country. And we ask ourselves whether those projects have been distributed fairly. Yesterday, when we were passing the schedule, Mr. Speaker, we also insisted that donor-funded projects, which I must add, Mr. Speaker, also should go to projects that are funded by loans taken by the people of Kenya, must be distributed fairly across the country. These petitioners are saying there are 2 projects that are in their county, and since independence, such projects of that magnitude have never been implemented in their county. Now that these projects are going on, we've been told that compensation is going on for some projects in Kiambu County, some projects in Tuake, and other places. They are asking this question: can it be found in law that there is discrimination in terms of distribution of projects, and particularly applying process of investigation, Mr. Speaker, on projects that are only in one county and not over 50 projects that are happening across the country? These are the key issues, so that I wanted to emphasize this, because it would be erroneous to imagine that any of us, including myself, would block a process or criticize a process that is fair, that arrives at a decision that says Kenyans must get value for money. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support the comments of this committee, and I believe the relevant committee which is going to handle this matter will be fair to the people of Elgeyo Marakwet and Kenya. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 231, I shall now allow comments, observation, and clarifications in relation to the petition for not more than 30 minutes. Senator Wetangula.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, listening to the majority leader and presenting the petition, I didn't hear anything said that the technical committee, in fact, visited the areas where the dams are being constructed to find out whether the issues at hand, in fact, were issues that the population have anything to do with. But listening, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, it reminds me of a good old saying in my community, that even the circumciser's son feels pain. Mr. Speaker, for the last 7 years, we have watched in awe and anger as the resources of the country are shared between 2 regions. Projects of mega proportions. On the onset, I agree with the majority leader that unilateral and unlawful decisions by anybody, including the president, must be dealt with as such. But Madam Speaker, last week I checked the budget office, and Senator Orengo should hear this, and I wanted to know how much money from the national government is coming to Bungoma County with a population of over 2 million people. I was shocked to find, Madam Speaker, that from a budget of 3 trillion, Bungoma County has resources from the national government of 2.1 billion, which includes CDF of 900 million. 2.1 billion including CDF. CDF is 900 million. So Bungoma County, we are getting 1.1 billion to about that in a budget of 3 trillion. So as we support the people of Elgeyo Marakwet, and I drive through the area where one of those dams is being constructed every other day, it's actually a natural site for a mega dam. And I would have made a similar decision if I was the president, to build a dam, not to discontinue the construction of a dam. Because those dams, Madam Speaker, will not just serve Elgeyo Marakwet. Those dams will serve Uasin Gishu, will serve Baringo, will serve Nakuru, and if they are not selfish, can extend up to Nandi and other places. But the core issue that the majority leader has read out, even listing projects in central Kenya, several of them. What about us? We pay taxes. This government has decided that this country belongs to two regions and they share resources as they wish and they develop as they wish. The other day I was asking myself, the artery of Kenya's economy, the highway from Mombasa to Malaba, turning over Mau Summit to Kericho, Kisumu, carries 60% of our external trade. We are busy constructing railways and terminating them in Naivasha, in the middle of somebody's land, instead of opening up highways to improve our economy. This is the mismatch that this government of Jubilee is doing to this country, Madam Speaker. And is the eye-opener for the majority leader for once to stand up now and see the other side of the coin. Now that the boot is on the other leg, we can all now speak from the same side, that an injustice to the people of Bungoma is an injustice to the people of Marakwet, is an injustice to the people of Siaya, is an injustice to all Kenyans. And the committee that will look at this, Madam Speaker, must also go out of their way and see the mega dams that have been talked about everywhere in this country. How far have the constructions gone? What are the levels of exaggeration of procurement in those projects? Lastly, Madam Speaker, the point that the majority leader mentioned about external resources coming to the country. There are people who sit in the treasury and routinely share external resources and external loans and external donations to their areas, to their regions, the exclusion of others. We are used now in the Western region to receiving every other day the president and his deputy to come and make promises. Hii itajengwa, hii itafanywa, hii itazinduliwa, hii itafanyika. And they finish and go away. So our people are now used to...
Order, Senator. What language were you speaking? We didn't
I'm
understand
quoting,
you.
Madam Speaker, and is allowed in law, in the standing orders.
What did you quote?
Hii itafanywa. I'm quoting what somebody said. Hii itafanyika, hii itazinduliwa, hii ita... That is allowed under our standing orders. Yes. And
I see a point of order from Senator.
Madam Speaker,
Yoni?
is it in order for the Honorable Senator Wetangula to continue emphasizing that the resources of this country are shared between two regions, while in some parts of the country, like in Nyandarua district, for the last 20 years, there has not been government funds going to the county?
Senator Wetangula.
it's good to know that there are also some unfavored children in the favored regions. Yes, please inform me.
Point of information, Senator Orengo.
Mr. Speaker, I was watching the debate in the House of Commons yesterday with a lot of interest. In fact, some of it is being discussed this morning. From what I've heard from the majority leader, what he has stated here, in very strong terms, and from what the senator from Nyandarua is saying, also putting up a very strong case about Nyandarua, Senator Wetangula, don't you think that belonging in Jubilee now is becoming a disaster because even those who belong to Jubilee are making all
Who are
these
you
types-
informing about Jubilee?
I'm informing him, yeah, because he's crying about...
But he's not a member of Jubilee.
No, I'm informing...
Senator, you cannot inform him about things that he's not involved in.
Mr. Speaker, this is information.
Another point of order, on a point of order, I want him to clear so that we can get point of order from Senator
Yes, but
Murkomen.
I'm giving information. And he's receiving it. He has agreed to receive it. If you don't want to receive information which is factual, then I can really understand. Because, you know, old women normally don't like, old men don't like bones being mentioned, like Chinua Achebe said.
Senator Murkomen, another point of order.
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for Senator Orengo to insist, to insinuate, Madam Speaker, that belonging to a certain political party, Mr. Speaker, in this republic means you are being denied development? Is the opposite also true, Madam Speaker, that belonging to ODM means that you are happier in this government, Madam Speaker?
Madam Speaker, let me finish by reminding my good friend Murkomen that we know, like I told you the other day, you belong to the outer layer of the onion peel. And we now appreciate you, like the petition said, that you are the able and distinguished senator for Elgeyo Marakwet, now able to articulate issues of Elgeyo Marakwet, now able to feel and see the injustices the people of Elgeyo Marakwet are receiving without any fear or favor, and you are now able to feel the pain that we have been feeling all these years. That's why I said even the circumcised son can feel pain. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Eden Dulo Fatuma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, sorry. Let me take this opportunity to support the petitioners from Elgeyo Marakwet. I don't want to delve into politics that was just expressed here. Madam Speaker, I think it is important that the President, of course, using his discretion, has cancelled the project. But a lot needs to be done before the cancellation of the project. Madam Speaker, there was a reason why this project in the first place was actually designed for Elgeyo Marakwet people, simply because to solve the problem of pastoralists in that area, the farmers in that area, which is a source of livelihood that the people of Elgeyo Marakwet benefit from. Madam Speaker, the committee that was set in place should have actually done due diligence in terms of ensuring that they have gone on the ground, they looked at the extent of the work that has taken place, what are the issues on the ground in terms of, you know, the benefits that are supposed to accrue from this particular project before cancellation, what are the ramifications in terms of cancellation, what are the projects actually in terms of the contract, whether the procedures were followed or not. Madam Speaker, cancellation of this project, it's like, you know, putting food on the table for somebody who is very hungry and he or she has not eaten for a whole week. Madam Speaker, this is really a very serious matter because people of Elgeyo Marakwet has been denied as a result of this cancellation, a very worthy project that would have actually improved their life. Madam Speaker, I think this is a very serious matter, and I don't know why this project was singled out. I know for sure, there are so many projects in this country that are not actually, procedures are not followed. But unfortunately, this has come to the limelight where the focus of the country is now the project in Elgeyo Marakwet. I hope the committee that is going to be delegated to this particular petition will be able to seriously look into this matter and advise accordingly so that people of Elgeyo Marakwet can actually get back this particular project where they'll be able to benefit and also ensure that in future things are done properly. Madam Speaker, I am appealing also to the government and the president that can he change his mind for the benefit of Elgeyo Marakwet people. I know the mistake is not theirs. The mistake is the technical people who have made the mistake. It's not the individuals or maybe the members of public who are really directly beneficiaries of this particular project. I appeal to him, let him rethink about it, let him actually appoint even another committee to go on the ground and give technical report and advice in terms of how this project was implemented and what effect that it is going to have on the people of Elgeyo Marakwet after cancellation. I thank you and I support and I hope the committee will be able to do proper work to advise the relevant institutions. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Orengo James.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are two issues here to be dealt with, and I think the majority leader did distinguish those two issues. One is the question of fraud. That question is being dealt with in another forum. But the questions that he has raised, I think some of them are very legitimate and need some inquiry. For example, Mr. Speaker, the award of tenders and signing of contracts is governed by statute, the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. And before a contract is awarded, you go through an entire process where due diligence is done, and many people are involved, including the Attorney General when it is a contract of this nature. And similarly, when there is need to cancel a contract which has been awarded, like the one we are talking about, cancellation of that contract also goes through a legal process. So I think this actually is a legitimate question to be inquired into by the relevant committee. Mr. Speaker, you remember, Madam Speaker, you remember that in the Anglo leasing matter, where the president decided that the money must be paid, it arose in circumstances where the government of Kenya decided to cancel the contract, where in circumstances in which there were proceedings in a tribunal, including an international tribunal, and it did not matter the decision that the Kenya government had taken. And we ended up paying a lot of money. Similarly, in Tanzania, you know, Tanzania tried to start a new airline, which was a very good effort by the Tanzanian government. But when the first plane landed in Joburg, it could not leave. So cancellation may cause a lot more problems than trying to find a lawful way of terminating the contract if it must. So that's an important question for this committee to look into. The other question is the actual decision by the president. Was it a decision by the president? Because if there is a cancellation under the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, there is a process how you cancel a contract. So I don't understand how the president would be able to cancel. And if he did it, then the Constitution says it must be in writing. And that is a legitimate question to be looked into and answers given. But having said that, Madam Speaker, we should be very careful about these huge capital contracts and projects which the government has been undertaking. And I've said before, I think President Kibaki was very wary of, not eating more than he can chew in terms of debts and borrowing and undertaking projects. You remember when the Volta, the biggest lake, man-made lake in Africa, is actually Lake Volta in Ghana. Very good idea. But eventually, I think it was one of the reasons which brought President Nkrumah down, because the country was taken through a lot of problems because a lot of resources were used to the neglect of other projects and other needs to that particular project. I'm seeing a situation in Kenya where we are undertaking projects which probably are not well planned for, which are probably, overpriced. I know in my area in Siaya, we got so many dams which were built during the colonial days, and they still exist. And how the colonial government was able to do them with the little resources and without loans, merely using internal or national resources, is something which probably needs a case study, because I think a lot of things were done during that period without a lot of borrowing. But in the current circumstances, we should look into the possibility of this building of dams being a way of skimming money. And when you realize that it's too much to bite, then you target certain areas and stop projects in certain areas and allow certain areas to go on. So this is something that we should look at. And this government should think seriously the manner in which it conceives of projects and implements those projects. But once a project is planned and budgeted for, whether the revenue is locally raised or externally raised, really there should not be a problem about finishing those projects. There's no project under the Public Finance Management Act that can be undertaken without a plan, without a budget and availability, and without appropriation. It cannot be done. So how this happened, you can, I understand more than 20, 30 billion shillings was paid for. How it was paid for and from which funds, and then there is nothing that has gone on on the ground, is something that we must look into. The other thing that worries me, Madam Speaker, is that normally in building contracts, and I would imagine that building a dam is akin to a building contract, you don't pay the entire sum, you pay in stages. You get certificates for every stage that has been completed. So we need a proper and thorough examination, because I think we'll be taking the people of Elgeyo Marakwet for fools if we go and announce we're building dams and suddenly they are told the dams are no longer going to be built or that they are being scaled down. This is an important matter because it may offer a solution to others. And I think it is not just going to be Elgeyo Marakwet and Kimwarera and Aror. There's a dams, I think something is just boiling. Something is boiling similar to the case of Kimwarera. So those who come from areas where dams have not been built and are in the process of being built, or where they're being built and they have not stopped, don't laugh, it may be too early to be joyous. Maybe the same fate is waiting. But overall, my position is that the government, rather than arresting and prosecuting people, they should come and give a proper explanation. Taking people to court is not good enough for a government which is elected. They should come and explain, and the people they are accountable to is Parliament and the sovereign are the people of Siaya and the people of Elgeyo Marakwet. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Finally, Langat Christopher, but before that, I have a communication to make. Honorable Senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of visiting students and teachers from Kamwera Academy School in Nairobi County. In our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Senator Langat, and you can do both.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I also join you in welcoming our children, the pupils from this particular county to this particular Senate, Nairobi County. They are here. And I want to tell them, welcome, we love you. And this house will continue protecting and making sure that your welfare as pupils is well taken care of. Madam Speaker, concerning this particular Kimwarer and Arar projects, I want to mention some few things. First of all, I've been following it seriously, and when we put it into some context, historically it is very funny that these particular projects have been proposed by government for about 30 years ago. I understand even that the feasibility study that was used for Kimwarer in particular was the one which was taken 28 years ago. When you check of these projects and see the delays that have been taking place, you cannot avoid thinking that the idea of cancellation of the Kimwarer is more political than the reality on the ground. It is very unfortunate that we can politicize very important projects that are aimed and made to target at solving problems that have been facing people since time immemorial. If you go to that place, you'll never fail to sympathize with the people living in this particular area. These are people who travel up to 300 kilometers to get water. And you know water is life, Madam Speaker. So a matter of, and you see what actually haunts even most is that there are so many dams in this country which were worth about 156 billion. But now the question that is in everyone's mind is why Kimwarer, why Arar? Even if these particular dams were affected by some scandals, it is high time that the government narrows down to those particular thieves or those who actually were involved in the scandals, but the project should not be cancelled. You know, this is punishing the innocent people, maybe because of one or two people. You know, in every time in history, we shall never lack people who have got problems. So it does, how comes that wherever there is a problem somewhere, we cancel the whole project that could benefit millions of people because of some few individuals? So I want to say the cancellation of Kimwarer is more political than reality. And you can never convince people in that particular area, Madam Speaker, that it is genuine. Even those people who went to investigate that particular, the status of those particular projects, there are people who are not even closer to that particular place. They did most of their works in hotels in Eldoret. They never even frequently visited those places to find out the actual problems to those particular areas. And I want to say, Madam Speaker, that it is high time that we rise to the occasion. And I hope we are going to be assisted by the committee that will investigate this so that we may help the citizens of this country who are paying taxes, and when it comes to the projects that they are supposed to be given to them, it becomes an issue to the point of cancelling them just forthwith. And I want to say that I will be very happy to see also other projects, for example, dams that were proposed together with Kimwarer be investigated, and we see the same solution happen to all of them. This selective idea of just going to investigate some particular projects in a particular area during a particular political hot period concerning some places, actually no one can actually understand that it is genuine, and everybody will take it as if it is political. So I would like to ask the committee that will investigate this one to assist not us here, who are actually having water maybe where we come from, but to mind of those particular citizens in Elgeyo Marakwet who are taxpayers in this country, and they have been suffering because of water for a long time. So, Madam Speaker, I support this particular statement from these people, this petition, and I want to encourage it to continue to the letter. And when it comes to compensation, I've been following up seriously. Most of the other dams in this country, in Kiambu, in Machakos, and everywhere else, the landowners have become compensated. Why the compensation of these particular projects were delayed? It raises also another question, Madam Speaker. And I'm saying that as one of the leaders from those particular regions, we are not going to relent until the rights of the people of this area are actually honored and taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators, Honorable Senators. Pass on to Standing Order 2321. The petition stands committed to the relevant standing committee, which in this case is Justice, Legal Affairs, and Human Rights. Because of the tilt of the debate, it doesn't seem to fit in any other except the Human Rights-oriented committee. In terms of Standing Order 2322, the committee will be required in not more than 60 calendar days from the time of reading the prayer to respond to the petitioner by way of a report addressed to the petitioner and laid on the table of the Senate. I thank you. Next order.
Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, statements.
Pass on to Standing Order 48-1. There is a state. Leader Majority, do you have a statement? Okay, the weekly statement, Leader. Yeah, let me allow him to do this. We know he's not extremely in his best mood, but it's going to take a minute. Then we can go to Senator Ali's statement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honorable Senators, pursuant to Standing Order 52-1, I hereby present to the Senate the business of the House for the week commencing Tuesday, 1st October 2019. On Tuesday, 1st October 2019, the Senate Business Committee will meet to schedule the business of the Senate for the week. On that day, and subject to further directions by the SBC, the Senate will consider bills due to the second reading and the business that will not be concluded in today's order paper. On Wednesday, 2nd October and Thursday, 3rd October 2019, the Senate will consider bills at the Committee of the Whole stage and business that will not be concluded on Tuesday and any other business scheduled by SBC. Honorable Senators, with respect to the status of bills, the House has a total of 26 bills pending conclusion in the Senate, with 17 bills at the second reading stage and 9 of the Committee of the Whole stage. I urge respective standing committees to conclude consideration of the bills and table reports pursuant to standing orders in the same breath. In the same breath, I urge respective movers of bills and motions to avail themselves whenever their business is listed in the order paper. Honorable Senators, I also take this opportunity to urge respective committees to expeditiously conclude with statements and petitions pending before them. Madam Speaker, I thank you and hereby lay the statement on the table of the Senate.
Thank you, Senator. Just to correct that was passed on to Standing Order number 52-1. Now, pass on to Standing Order number 48-1. I call on Senator Dr. Abdullahi Ali.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speakers, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 48-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare regarding the recruitment of senior personnel at the Geothermal Development Company. In the statement, the committee should address the following. 1, state the policy or regulatory framework that guides recruitment of senior personnel at the Geothermal Development Company. Number two, confirm compliance with Chapter 6 of the Constitution with regard to the filling of vacancies as advertised in 2 daily newspapers, the Daily Nation and Standard, on 12 February 2019, specifically with regards to the interviews involving the positions of senior managers. Number 3, establish whether regional and gender balance were taken into consideration during the recruitment exercise at Geothermal Development Company for the period in question. Madam Speaker, there's a big scandal at Geothermal. They have decided to advertise for 11 positions. 4 of them, they claim they didn't get enough people. Then the 7 remaining, the directors have decided to give each one of them one person, so that the people who are qualified, who are number one in the interviews, who have done very well, who have worked in this organization for the last several years, none of them has been taken, and the people from outside were brought. To the extent that the members who are working with geothermal and who are applied for this position of managers, who are deputy managers and around and others, have decided to write to DCI, to AACC, to everywhere. This is injustice, Madam Speaker, and nepotism of the highest order is happening in geothermal. And I am informed that the 7 who are recruited all come from one region. One region, all of them, all 7. So, Madam Speaker, these issues of nepotism and corruption in this country will cause this country to fall, and I urge the people concerned to stop this behavior, and the committee responsible to look into this urgent issue immediately and as fast as possible. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Okay, that automatically stands committed to the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. Next order. I just want to confirm to members that the statement by Senator Faria is being deferred as per her own request. So next order, please.
Order number 8, motion, approval of the county government's cash disbursement schedule for financial year 2019-2020 division.
Honorable Senators, for the convenience of the House, this order number 8 has been deferred. Next order.
Order number 9, the establishment of Children's Homes Bill, Senate Bills number 12 of 2019, second reading.
I don't see the mover, and I have not seen a request for this bill on the establishment of children's homes. Then, Honorable Senators, order number 10 on consultation. We have, next order first.
Order number 10, motion, legal and policy interventions for caregivers of persons with permanent motor and neurological disorders.
Honorable Senators, the order number 10, following consultations, has also been deferred. Next order.
Order number 11, motion, engagement of community health workers by county governments.
Honorable Senators, Senator Rose Nyamunga is out of the country on an official trip, so that stands deferred.
Next order.
Order number 12, motion, formation of community forest associations to aid in management of forest resources within counties.
Honorable Senators, order number 12 stands deferred. Next order.
Order number 13, motion, free administration of the snake bites antivenom in public health facilities.
Honorable Senators, the mover of the motion, motion 13, Senator Beatrice Kwamboga, requested deferment of this motion. Next order. What's your point of order, Senator Kajwang?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, considering the rate at which certain business is being pushed forward, and I understand that members of this House, when they're not here, they must be attending to other parliamentary business elsewhere, be it in the country or out of the country. But since we came back for this particular session, we've had cases of deferment of business of the House. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to seek the indulgence of the chair. If we could make a resolution that in this House, in this Senate, every Thursday afternoon from 2:30 to 4:30 p.m., we dedicate that time to consideration and debate of the reports of the Public Accounts and Investments Committee. Mr. Speaker, we have a stash of 70 reports that are awaiting adoption by this House. These reports have previously been brought to this House. In the last session, we laid on the table of the House more than 30 reports. The House went into recess. The session ended without the House having considered those reports. And so, Mr. Speaker, to help deal with these situations where, sometimes you've got Thursdays and you're not sure whether you're going to exhaust the business for the day, if I could beg the Speaker to consider and to indulge the SBC and to come back to the House, and we set aside Thursday afternoons, for county oversight reports. And Mr. Speaker, I want to assure you that the House will never be short of business, because the number of reports that the Public Accounts and Investments Committee is holding is enough to keep this Senate busy for the next 6 months. Mr. Speaker, I beg that even if you're not going to rule on it now, that you do consider setting aside Thursday afternoon, because already we spend Wednesdays on division, already we spend Mondays on Tuesdays on bills. We could spend Thursday the first 2 hours on PAC reports and then spend the rest of the day on motions. Mr. Speaker, I beg.
Thank you, Senator Kajwang. Senator Kajwang, you've raised a very important point, and that point, we wish the House Business Committee to note your concerns, and therefore call the clerks on table to read next order.
Order number 14, motion, report of the Parliament of Kenya Delegation to the sessions of African Caribbean Parliamentary ACP Assembly and the sessions of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly.
Senator Margaret Kamar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the motion on the report of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, 2 reports, in fact, the 50th session and the 51st session. But even as I moved, Mr. Speaker, I was trying to get your attention earlier to support a statement from the Senator Chair of the Finance Committee, that Senator Achuang, that we actually need to get the reports of the counties here as fast as possible. And I'm glad you have ruled that the House Business Committee should pay attention to that. Because, Mr. Speaker, we don't want to be caught with time. Then when we go for a meeting like we did when we went to Kitui, we discover that we are not reading on the same page between ourselves, the governors, and the MCAs. I think senators must really be ahead of everybody in terms of that. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the 50th session of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly, which I attend on behalf of Mr. Speaker. This one we attended with Senator Faki. Honorable Speaker, the 50th session of the ACP-EU took place alongside the 35th session of the African Caribbean Pacific Parliamentary Group meeting, both of which were held between the 16th to the 20th of June, and the 13th to the 15th June, respectively, in Brussels, Belgium. The session was preceded by meetings of the standing committees, and there are 3 standing committees, Mr. Speaker: the Political Affairs Committee, the Economic Development Committee, Economic Development, in fact, Trade and Finance, and the Social Affairs and Environment Committee. Honorable Speaker, the 35th session of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific and the European Union Joint Parliamentary Meeting and the 50th plenary sessions of ACP deliberated on various matters of concern to the member states, and also exercised scrutiny over the European Commission, the ACP, and the AU councils through a question and answer session. And the deliberations that took place, Mr. Speaker, I will highlight 4 of them. 1 was demographic growth, the challenges and opportunities globally. B was the global impact of migration, which has become an issue of migrants from the ACP states moving to the West. The 3rd one was on immigration itself, how the immigrants are being handled. And the 4th area of highlight was fighting the xenophobia, racism, and discrimination. All these were very, very important topics, Mr. Speaker, that touched both the ACP group and the European Union groups. Because in some cases, if you talk of xenophobia, this has spread. It is in both in the European states as well as in the ACP states. And when it came to migration, Mr. Speaker, it touches both where the immigration is taking place and where the recipients are going to settle. These became very important topics of discussion during this 50th session of the ACP-EU and the 35th session of the ACP group, parliamentary group. Honorable Speaker, while the Standing Committee on Political Affairs, Economic Development, Trade and Finance Committee and the Committee on Social and Environmental, Social Affairs and Environment considered the following several areas for purposes of reporting. the ACP-AU looked at the relations also, the relations between the ACP and the EU post-Cotonou. Mr. Speaker, the Cotonou relations is coming to an end in the year 2020, and this has become a major point of discussion. Also discussed was the social and environmental consequences of urbanization, particularly the sound management of industrial waste in the ACB group of countries. Also brought forward was the impact of the illegal trade in phytosanitary products, including seeds and other agricultural inputs on the ACP countries' economies. On the sideline of the two sessions, a number of conferences and meetings also took place, Mr. Speaker, which had a lot of bearing to the agenda that was being discussed, and two specific side events which were very important under the ACP-EU umbrella is the Women's Forum and the Youth Forum. Honorable Speaker and honorable members, in line with its unique role of parliamentary scrutiny over the ACP and EU institutions by this membership, holding of formal question time sittings with the European Commission and the ACP and EU Council presidency in every session is also emphasized. The Assembly, therefore, sought the European Commission on a number of matters on the partnerships between the European Union and the ACB group of states post-2020, when the Cotonou Agreement will be expiring. The external action of the European Union in the coming years, with emphasis on the increase in the external expenditure proposed by the Commission for the next multi-annual financial framework, was also put on the table. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the new cooperation and development financial structure and the proposal for integration of the European Development Fund into the European Union's budget was discussed. Other debates also included urgent motions on the urgency of new measures to fight international terrorism and the humanitarian crisis in South Sudan. Mr. Speaker, in the current context of the conference, the delegation noted that the discussions on the future of the ACP-EU cooperation picked up pace in the year 2015, with both the EU and the ACP group of states engaging in a soul-searching exercise and preparing their future positions, because this has been discussed for quite a while now. For the last 3 years, the discussions on post-Cotonou have been going on. There are meetings of our councils of ministers at the regional level, including our own region, the East African region, the African group, and Caribbean group, the Pacific group. And so the future post-Cotonou is very, very high in the agenda in the forum of the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. There are complex policies, of course, and the process that the process of reaching consensus on how post-Cotonou will look like is one that is extremely broad, it's evidence-based, and it requires a lot of debate. And that debate is going on even now, Mr. Speaker, under different groupings. The stakes involved in the review process are high, and they include, if I may mention just a few, Mr. Speaker, is the European Development Fund, providing predictable resources and accounting for a larger share of the EU development aid than any other external instrument. This has been discussed because of the fact that the amount of money that comes after and under the European Development Fund has always been limited, and the ACB groups have been pushing for an increase. The other area is the growing number of alternative or competing policy and institutional frameworks, such as the Joint Africa-Europe Strategy, which is posing a major challenge of policy coordination and coherence for the various partners involved. This became a major debate, Mr. Speaker, because the European Union seemed to have indicated at that stage that they would like to deal with Africa as Africa, not as SCP, and yet the foundation of this parliamentary assembly, the SCP-EU, is the union between the African, Caribbean, and the Pacific groups, knowing very well that the SCP groups are actually brothers and sisters, because the Caribbeans and the Pacific residents are people who left Africa a long time ago. So during these meetings, discussions were held on whether the European Union will actually continue with SCP the way it is, or they're going to go regional so that they deal with Africa on its own, deal with the Caribbean on its own, and deal with the Pacific on its own, which proposal was strongly opposed by the SCP group because of the belief that the only reason we have the SCP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly is so that we realize the unity of the SCP group. In fact, Mr. Speaker, at the time when discussions were going on, there was a meeting of AU in Rwanda, and there was a communication that was sent by our delegation of the SCP group of parliamentarians to our heads of state to make it very clear that we stand by the position that SCP remains one, and we are very, very happy that pronouncements were made. And in fact, our own head of state made the pronouncement in Rwanda that we are not going to break the SCP group, and we are not going to negotiate with the European Union as entities of Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific separately, but that we must actually work together because of the importance of these three groups, the importance of keeping these three groups in a united state. Mr. Speaker, the Cotonou Partnership Agreement, which links the EU and its 28 member states with a tri-continental group of 79 states, that is the SCP group, is, as I said earlier, going to come to its to end in 2020, and negotiations are on. It is often hailed as a very unique agreement, taking into account its legally binding nature, holistic approach to development, comprehensive scope covering the three pillars of aid, trade, and political cooperation, and the joint management arrangements that have been put in place. It offers a single framework for the operation of the European Investment Bank in the SCP countries, and that's why members of parliament from the 78 of the 79 partner states from the SCP group insist that this grouping of SCP must continue. The Cotonou Agreement also, which replaced the Lome Convention, was concluded for a period of 20 years, commencing in the year 2000. That is why it's going to lapse in the year 2020. The SCP and the EU have therefore begun in earnest the internal consultations on the future of the relationship and whether we are going to remain in the same structure or the structure will change. The formal negotiations were set to commence in August, September 2018, which actually they did. And I'm happy to report that our Minister of Foreign Affairs, our ambassadors are moving very well on that. Mr. Speaker, the partnership is also critical for a number of reasons. Among them, it ties the EU and the 79 countries from Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. Most of them are former colonies, of course, of the European Union, thus one of the largest global partnerships. And this unity of the SCP and the EU is one of the largest global partnerships. It builds on a long period of over 40 years of partnerships. It underpins a legally binding contract, CPA, based on 3 pillars, as I said earlier: trade, aid, and political cooperation. The European Development Fund is the main instrument for providing the community aid for development cooperation by the AU to the ACP states. The 10th EDF covered the period 2008 to 2013 and provided a budget of more than 22 billion euros. The 11th EDF, in fact, increased to that 1.5 billion euros. So this partnership has a lot of support that comes to these ACP countries, and this is what we have appreciated, and we really believe as members of this assembly that the current structure is useful to all of us. Mr. Speaker, as I wind up, the delegation is concerned that the parties in the Cotonou Partnership Agreement led by the governments, but including parliamentarians and civil society, private sector operators, and local authorities, will need to address a set of existential questions that have arisen from the past, and especially when they look critically at the past 20 years. The Kenya delegation in this meeting, as I wind up, was led by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the Honorable Cheboy. I was the co-leader of delegation. We also had the Honorable Ali Dido Raso, the Honorable Lillian Gogo, and the Honorable Faki in the first meeting. And in the second meeting, we had the Honorable Locorio as part of the delegation. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I want to say we are very grateful as a delegation to the Speaker, the Speakers of the two houses, for putting together this very strong delegation and entrusting us with this big agenda. So I beg to move and request Professor Ongeri to second.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, Madam Senator Kamal, for giving me the opportunity to second this motion, which has been very well articulated. And I think for the benefit of everybody else, that the ACP-EU partnership is based on the understanding that within the ACP there are 79 countries that form the ACP group. And within the AU, there are issues that are being canvassed in terms of development and other issues. And indeed, when you combine all those issues together, you can narrow them that this partnership, and particularly the Cotonou, the ACP EU Cotonou Agreement, had the impact of being able to create a balance, an even balance, between the developed and the developing nations. And this is how this partnership came into vogue. And this partnership took into account issues of poverty as the main issues of sustainable development. And you know, we had the Sustainable Development Goals, the 7 goals that had been articulated through the United Nations, and the singular honor and occasion, in fact, to be able to be part of that puzzle
when we were discussing about the new sustainable development and the new urban agenda. And also, it had the way of escalating and debating on how to handle some of the most difficult issues that are found within the developing nations, particularly the handling of solid waste management. It's an eyesore because it's a creation of problems and issues for us to be able to articulate. And therefore, when this session went to meet, I'm happy that one of the issues that they looked at is the global impact of migration. Now, migration has an effect on both sides. And then the other point is the immigration itself. And of course, the xenophobia that we see so rampant, unfortunately, within one of our ACP countries. I think the most important issue that must come out quite clearly in this report and in this engagement of the ACP EU Cotonou Agreement of 2020 is the issue on how do you balance the resource of the global resource to be equitably shared amongst the nations of this world, the global village. That's why it's important that in looking at these agreements and in engaging in these meetings, that we must look at the issues that stand out quite clearly. And one of them for Africa, for that matter, and for Kenya, for that matter, and within Kenya, within regions and counties, is the issue of poverty. And I hope that this is one of the rich debate that must have occupied most of the time, because how do you address the issues of poverty? There are so many people who are living below $1 a day. It's very pathetic. And yet the northern, and I will soon come to it, issues of migration are related to the well-being of people. People searching for better pastures, for green pastures. Therefore, they want to emigrate to economies that are relatively doing better than their own economies. So this imbalance is the one which is causing this major problem of migration. And it's important, therefore, that in these ACP EU partnerships, that these issues are squarely discussed and a solution found to it. Not only a solution in words, but in terms of effect and in being able to cause action-oriented steps to be taken so that you can address these poverty issues. And as long as I know, the only way that we can be able to address issues of this nature is basically to look at what ails us in the developing nations. I think I dare venture that one of the most important elements that we see here today is environment. The second element is energy. The third element is health. And the fourth element is education. And when you go through the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 1 is no poverty. Goal 2, zero hunger. Again, all related to poverty. Goal 3, good health and well-being. Goal 4, quality of education. Goal 5, gender equality. Goal 6, clean water and sanitation. And I can go on and on and on. These are issues within our purview and within our domain. And therefore, for us to stem the impact of global migration, I think we need to ensure the resource flow from the well-to-do nations to the non-well-doing nations are timely and are predictable. And I think that's why we said that you're not helping Africa. You are simply balancing the ecological systems of the global systems. That if you don't balance them, the world becomes unsustainable. We cannot live in it. And therefore, the sustainable, what I call the bad habits of the North, for instance, the issues of environment, they have been able to bring effluents, the discharges that are to the environment are the ones that have caused in Europe, what you call what is left of the forests in Europe. This is where the carbon sink has been exhausted. The CO2 sink has been exhausted. So when you get the rains from up, it's only acid rains. And therefore, they are looking towards the Amazon. They are looking forward towards the forests in the Congo River to be able to give them some leeway of survival. In other words, when you hear of this carbon, the carbon exchange, it's nothing to do except the unsustainable way of development in the north, and therefore they are borrowing the habits in the south. Consequently, we have suffered environmental degradation because of the weather patterns that have completely changed. And therefore, the food production has brought about poverty. People are unable to even produce enough for their own survival. And therefore, in this partnership, I believe our delegation, they must keep their eye on the ball. And keeping their eye on the ball is saying, hold on. You are the people who have created this mess for us. You are the people who have amassed all the resources for their own consumption. How do you then share out those resources? And I remember at one stage when I was negotiating in the Biodiversity Convention, and I was negotiating for the sharing of biodiversity resources and the technological advances in the biodiversity, I came across a very awkward attitude, a very haughty attitude of the so-called developed nations, saying that we have been able to invest so much in our research, and therefore you must be able to pay through the patent rights that have been set out. And therefore Africa and the Caribbean countries suffer this uneven development because the North has been able to carry away everything that needed to be carried away. And therefore we continue being poor. And with the environmental degradation, it makes even situations worse. And therefore, this partnership is useful because then we're able to make sound arrangements and sound development based on sustainable development and also on questions of how to deal with the solid waste management. One of the biggest elements in Kenya today, for instance, is the element of cancer. Now we're asking several questions. Why is such an upsurge of cancer? Is it because of the discharges, the effluents that are coming through our industries? Who are the owners of these industries? Where are the raw materials coming? Have we been able to allow people to be able to treat this solid waste management in a manner that is safe and acceptable? Have we been able to exploit the solid waste management for our own energy requirements, the clean energy requirements? So these are the major issues: economic issues, social issues, political issues. And of course, coming to political issues, when you look at elements like xenophobia, it's nothing else to do except people saying, hold on, why are you engaged in jobs in our country when we don't have anything to even put at the table? It boils down to that very basic element, that people have been so deprived to a level where they can be able to start causing mayhem to other citizenry of this world. And we don't, of course, we don't condone that. What I'm really saying is this ACP EU partnership, the Cotonou 2020 rather, not 2030, 2030 must now start churning out coherent, sustainable development through the investment of resources that are predictable and are sustainable. I second this motion. I think it's a good thing, it's a good partnership, and I think we can take credit that we are in that group. And I thank the delegation that represented us in this area, and more so that they should bring out all these elements that are brought out, that we should address them for the benefit not only of Kenya, but of Africa and ACP, and of course, the global world. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I propose the motion that this House note the report of the Parliament of Kenya Delegation to the 50th session of ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 35th session of ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Brussels, Belgium, from 13th to 20th June 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 20th February 2019, and the reports of the Parliament of Kenya Delegation to 51st session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the intersessional meetings of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Brussels, Belgium from 9th to 11th October 2018 and the 52nd session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 36th session of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Cotonou, Benin from 25th November to 5th December 2018, both laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 8th August 2019. Senator Chiriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. It's a very important motion that is before us, the adoption of this report by our delegation that represented us at the 50th ACP EU conference. Mr. Speaker, it's important that we put things into perspective. You know, we are living in very interesting times that on many occasions it is not considered in this country to be a noble thing to sometimes travel to some of these conferences and give your input and get to learn, interact with legislators and leaders from other parts of the country. And this comes at a time, Mr. Speaker, when in the course of today, there's been a huge discussion online about the value that some of these excursions actually, or benchmarking trips to a certain extent, or conferences like this one, whose report we are adopting, or whose motion for adoption of this report we are deliberating on, Mr. Speaker. And many things have been said on the gains or otherwise of this particular activities, Mr. Speaker. And it will be important for the country to get to note that many are the times that when members of parliament or other leaders engage in this kind of collaborations and partnership, that this is actually the direction where the world is moving on to. You know, we come from a history where back in the day, the era of strongmen is long gone and not with us anymore. There were days, Mr. Speaker, when if you pick the continent of Africa, with 3, 4, or 5 men, and actually I'm specific to the term men because there were no women on that high table then, will sit and they will resolve almost all the challenges that the continent was facing. But the truth as it is right now, Mr. Speaker, is that in many of the countries world over, this era of strong men and women, people who've ruled an entire region with an iron fist, and therefore if you want to deliberate on issues that are facing a particular continent, region, or a particular people, you sit at a table and deliberate and hope to agree on, are long gone and not with us anymore. It is in conferences like this particular one, Mr. Speaker, that many of the issues, the global challenges that we continue to face as a people, either individually, in our own respect as a country, from the region where we come from, the continent, and wholesomely to the entire globe, that you get to discuss at an open forum and get to educate each other, get to understand. You see, the interaction, the way it's structured, Mr. Speaker, is that it is a laid back approach to these issues, to the extent that you get to sit down and understand, get to have a view of things from the point of view of the other, from people from different parts of the world, which is very different from how you get to interact with the issues either by reading online or listening to news and getting just to understand where this is what is happening. Certain regions are struggling
with xenophobic attacks. Others are struggling with a bulging, well-educated youth population that has got nothing useful to do. When you interact with the leaders from that region, Mr. Speaker, and you get to engage, some of these issues get simply sorted out even by some of the resolutions that have been adopted or that are proposed in some of these conferences, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it goes without much saying that having read through the report, and I've had a chance to scrutinize and read through some of the topics that this delegation actually got to consider during their time in Brussels, it will be, it is a great and enriching report for any legislator and any leader who wants to have an impact in our society, Mr. Speaker, both to the countries that the African, Caribbean, and Pan-African, together with the EU region, Mr. Speaker. For example, when they speak about the demographic growth, you know, the big debate that exists in the globe currently, Mr. Speaker, how is it that you are able to forge a collaboration between the aging European population vis-a-vis the young, bulging, energetic, well-educated African population? It is through collaborations such as this, Mr. Speaker, that in conferences such as the one that was attended by our colleagues, that they are able to make an impression on our colleagues in the European Union on where there can be knowledge transfer or even transfer of skills and the opportunities that are available therein, both that are mutually beneficial, actually, Mr. Speaker. It's not just a pleading case where we imagine that as Africans we'll be seated at the table and we'll be extending a begging bowl to our colleagues from the European Union saying, oh, we have young people who are able to work for you. That is not the case, Mr. Speaker. It's actually a mutually beneficial exercise where for the problems that for the challenges that they face, Mr. Speaker, we have the solutions. And for some of the challenges that you also face as a continent, they have the solution, because having some of their democracies being older than ourselves, and you know the relationship as it is, Mr. Speaker, is no longer that of colonialists and the colonized, you know, sitting at a table where you want to imagine that because of the history and how we've been socialized, Mr. Speaker, that one will have an upper hand over the other. And reading through the report that I've been able to pen and following through the deliberation, some of the conference resolutions that have been placed here for us to read, Mr. Speaker, you really must appreciate the contribution of the delegation that we sent here, not only for us as a country, but the entire African region, for putting up a strong case to understand that what Africa needs, actually, more than anything, is collaboration. It's not the era of aid is long gone, Mr. Speaker. On our very own, we are able to put up a strong case and provide much the skills and the requisite knowledge, Mr. Speaker, to be able to change and make our significant contribution in alleviating poverty, disease, ignorance, the many challenges that you continue to face as a continent, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, reading through the contributions of our colleagues, I would want to say thank you for the brilliant representation. Of course, it's difficult to sit at that table and try and make such a strong case while you're moving to the second topic and you're discussing issues like migration. Of course, and you know that part of the problems they are presenting are our own people who are trying to cross, say, into Europe via boat and that kind. It doesn't match well that on one hand you're saying, I have well-educated young people who can provide solutions to you. On the other hand, the person that you're trying to sell your continent to tells you, oh, okay, that's fair enough, but on my side, my biggest challenge is, say, immigration, where many of your young people are dying, you know, as they try to make these journeys via very rickety boats and the kind of things that they do. And it's important, I've seen from the deliberation that many of the countries actually were able to inform the conference of what steps they are taking. These are challenges that are all over. Even Europe at a particular time, if you read through history, when they faced the challenges of disease, they moved to other continents. When they had challenges of resources, they moved downwards to Africa. That's why they came and colonized us. Therefore, this issue of Africa being viewed as if it is a failed region simply because maybe because of upheavals in certain parts of this continent and people are trying to fend for themselves. You've got to understand that in the human mindset, not everybody is made with a tenacity to hang in there and be able to fight and believe that there can be a better future for our continent. Of course, there are bound to be people who will imagine that Europe offers, or the Pacific offers, a better opportunity for them than here in Africa. But the contributions of many of the European countries that form part, the 28 of them that form part of the EU, come from a position of understanding that these challenges can be surmounted, that these young people of the countries that are having these upheavals, actually a solution can be found such that people can easily be able to settle in their countries and be able to solve that particular problem. Instead of just trying to close your borders and saying that nobody is allowed here. Of course, people will always find a way in, whether you like it or you don't. That is the experience that Europe has had for the last 5 to 10 years. Despite the more stricter they become with their immigration laws, the more creative those who want to beat the system have become. And one way or the other, you end up having the illegal immigrants with you. And therefore, it will make more sense if in conferences like this, you suggest solutions. What kind? Of course, there's the discussion of what European Union Development Fund aid is doing in many of the African countries, for example, or the Caribbean or the Pacifics, Mr. Speaker. It will be good that in such deliberations, they get to hear from the leaders, what is it that will create more impact? What is it that will be able to keep this bulging young African population from having to think that the only way out of the challenges that they are facing as a country is by running away to Europe? I saw that they spent time, Mr. Speaker, also discussing about the issue of xenophobic attacks and discrimination. And it's good that countries in forums like this get to have knowledge and information transfer on how each of the individual countries are able to surmount many of these challenges. Of course, it would be good to hear from our colleagues from the countries that are affected. Of course, while Africa and our colleagues in the southern part of Africa continues to face this challenge of xenophobic attacks, you understand, Europe also has a similar challenge, things to do with racism. Those that are fans of football get to know that one of the biggest challenges that the issues of integration amongst Europe continue to face is that they take a firm stand against fans or people that actually discriminate down on others or look down on others based on the color of their skin. And it will be a good learning experience to our colleagues who we have had discussions in this House, Mr. Speaker, where we felt, for example, that South Africa as a country isn't responding in the way that is needed to the challenges of discrimination. It will be good to learn from our counterparts in Europe how they are taking a firm stand. I saw, Mr. Speaker, 2 days ago that West Ham Football Club was able to put out the name of a racially abusive fan. And they've said, we have banned him for life. He can never be part and parcel of us. That's not the world that we believe in. Those are good experiences that us that come from this particular region, we can also be firm with the rest of the regions. And discrimination, Mr. Speaker, though pronounced in countries like South Africa, happens even us at a local level. When you are a leader, you know, you got to learn from experiences. We were challenging our colleagues the other day, Mr. Speaker, when you were having tea at the Senator's Lounge, that discrimination begins even with you as a senator. The number of people that you employ in your office, does it come only from the dominant community in your county? Yet we know that in every particular part of this country, there are also the minority communities. How is that reflected in your office as a senator? If you were to check the number of the people that work in your constituency office as a senator, will we get? Those are issues of discrimination as well, which we need to be alive about. Finally, Mr. Speaker, you know, these are very interesting times, and for such conferences, of course, it will have been important to hear what were the key highlights, what were the moments that stole the show, and challenged people to give attention to particular problems that the globe continue to face, either in Africa, the Caribbean, the Pacifics, or even in the AU. The way the young Greta Thunberg has been able to capture the attention of the world on environmental issues at the ongoing session of UNGA in New York, Mr. Speaker. Speaking so passionately, that young girl has been able to say what all the head of states put together in that room were not able to say, that this business of measuring each other's ego and trying to look good will not solve the environmental issues, degradation issues that this world continues to face. And it is my sincere hope that as I conclude that session, they will heed the cry of Greta and the millions of young children across the globe who feel the challenges of the environment, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I support this very good report by our colleagues. Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleagues for contributing to this report. I just want to respond, to comment first this report to all the members in this House to read, because there are a lot of practical solutions that come out of this. Because of the nature of the way this parliamentary group operates, where we have 3 committees, as I mentioned earlier. There is the Committee of Social and Environment, there is a Committee of Economy, Finance and Trade, and then there is a Political Committee. You will find that within the structure, we actually deal with very, very practical and current issues. Just as Senator, just like the Senator of Kericho has said, there are actually a lot of practical solutions that come out of this, because by the very nature of how we approach it, topics are brought in, and there have been very interesting topics, Mr. Speaker, on various areas. We have, for example, looked at the issue of terrorism in its global nature and reduced it to the intercontinental relations that have been affected by this. And if you look at these reports, you'll find that there are so many issues that have been raised. In the political committee, for example, we even look at the state of politics in various countries. We even discussed Kenya, and we have discussed Kenya even after the handshake. It came up, somebody threw it as a motion and said we would like to understand what that means. And we were able to articulate the peace that came and whatever. So they're very, very specific issues, and we deal with very specific issues. The issue of immigration has been an eyesore to everybody, because xenophobia is not just an African issue, it is a lot in Europe. We know that we have had cases of, in France, where people are actually fighting against anybody coming in. The current state of the UK, the issue of Brexit, is actually arising from that. It is just a national decision that we need to take care of our borders. We want to make sure that we isolate any entry without permission. So even for their own movement between UK and the European Union, you find that is being curtailed because of that. But this is, as mentioned by Senator Ongeri, is a relationship that really brings out a number of collaborative issues, collaborative agendas that do with everything from climate change to development cooperation. And these are extremely important for us, because truly climate change has made the SCP states, particularly Africa, to be the solution providers without recognition. Without recognition, because as mentioned even by the Senator, this is where you have the natural resource bank. This is where climate change is being ameliorated. So there is need for resources from those who have overexploited their own regions to actually shift the resources to develop the countries that have conserved their natural resources and have given them a bank for the carbon dioxide to be absorbed. So those are some of the issues, again, that we have been discussing, and we have discussed climate change a lot. And that's why I really commend this report to our members, the members of this House, so that all of us are praised on not only the relationship between Africa, Kenya and Europe, but also on the development agendas that will benefit us. Finally, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the EU is actually Kenya's second largest development cooperation partner. It is second to the World Bank. And similarly, the EU is the second largest destination of Kenyan products. So because of that, and that is after COMESA. So because of that, our relationship with the EU is extremely important. And that's why it is so gratifying that these houses are represented at the parliamentary session. Our Council of Ministers is represented by our ministers in various fora, so that we tap on the relationship and make sure that it works for us. With those remarks, I beg to move.
Honorable Senators, the motion does not affect counties. Honorable Senators, the motion does not affect counties. I therefore proceed to put the question, which is that this House notes the report of the Parliament of Kenya Delegation to the 50th session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 35th session of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Brussels, Belgium from 13 to 20th June 2018, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 20th February 2019, and the reports of the Parliament of Kenya Delegation to the 51st session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the intersessional meetings of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Brussels, Belgium from 9th to 11th October 2018, and the 52nd session of the ACP Parliamentary Assembly and the 36th session of the ACP EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly held in Cotonou, Belgium from the 25th November to 5th December 2018, both laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 8th August 2019. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of the contrary say nay? The ayes have it. Next order. Honorable Senators, I therefore defer order number 15, 16, 17, and 18 as their sponsors or the movers of the motions are engaged elsewhere. Honorable Senators, there being no other business, it's now time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until tomorrow, Tuesday, 1st October 2019 at 2:30 p.m.